I've been asked to introduce our speaker for this evening. Right? I can see that he's no stranger to most of us, and most of us remember him about 6 months ago when he came to us during our retreat. And we were so taken in by him that we decided that we wanted to have him again. And so tonight he came, he's here to do a fireside chat with us on leadership. Fellow Lions, just let me tell you a little bit about PCC Malcolm. We know that he's a wonderful speaker. He has lots of information to share with us this evening, as he did the last time that he was here. So let me say, Lion Malcolm is an area leader for Constitutional Area, 1E for LCIF. He's a past district governor of District 60B, a past council chair of MD 60, and a past GLT-GMT special area advisor for MD 60, D63, Haiti, and Belize. I'm hearing noises. And Belize. He has facilitated leadership workshops at the district and multiple district levels at the USA-Canada Lions Leadership Forum and at conventions of the International Association. Additionally, he has served as a member of the faculty for the Regional Lions Leadership Institute, RLLI, the Emerging Lions Leadership Institute, ELLI, and the Advanced Lions Leadership Institute, ALLI. But we all are familiar with those. And most recently, he was appointed by then International President Douglas Alexander as a group leader for the 2021-2022 class of incoming district governors. PCC Malcolm is certified as a Lions Certified Instructor by Lions International. In his professional career, Lion Malcolm Kirwan, I hope I'm saying that right, has been a university vice president, the founding executive director of the University of the Virgin Islands Research and Technology Park, an associate professor of management and business and training consultant. He holds advanced degrees in management, finance, and various other certificates in college management, grievance mediation, and dispute resolution, and entrepreneur education. Lion Malcolm is a Progressive Melvin Jones Fellow and is the recipient of numerous certificates and awards. He has the high distinction of being presented with the Presidential Medal by seven different presidents of the International Association for his leadership contribution to Lionism. Lion Malcolm, on behalf of District 20K1, I welcome you to our fireside chat. We're looking forward to hearing from you just now, if you're ready. But before we go, I think it's on you, okay? Lion Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Madam Master of Ceremonies, or Mistress of Ceremonies. Mm-hmm. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the District Governor Lion Ingrid, any former international officers in the virtual audience, District K1 Cabinet officers and members present, other Lions in the audience, Leos, and guests. Good evening to everyone. I'm delighted to have been asked to give the second presentation on leadership as part of your District K1 Leadership Town Hall. It's really an honor for me to have been invited a second time to speak with you about leadership. It is a topic that is close to my heart, and I have very strong feelings about a lot of things relating to leadership and how we need to work together to enable clubs and empower clubs to become healthy and thriving organizations. So this is an extension of the talk I gave last year. And it is focused on the district governance theme and also on a variant of that theme relating to the broader area of service and lionism for a better tomorrow. So when we think of line district governance in its theme, leading today for a better tomorrow, we should all understand that it means enabling service today for a better tomorrow.
Muted.
Am I okay? We all serve,
Quick.
whether we are leaders or not. Service in lines is not limited to leaders. If I were to ask you why you serve, most of you will say you serve to improve the quality of life in the community in which you live. You would probably say you're fighting against poverty and hunger. You're fighting for the lives of children afflicted by cancer. You're fighting for better living conditions for senior citizens and persons with disabilities. You're fighting to fulfill the service mission of our association. And that is all to the good. But very few of us will say we are fighting for the life of the movement which we serve and which is losing vitality and strength. That we are fighting to preserve the strength and vitality of the membership community that is the foundation on which clubs are built. As Lions, we focus so much on making positive changes in the communities in which we live. We often forget that it is the health and vitality of our clubs that make these positive changes possible. When we talk about building healthy clubs, we should recognize that we're not referring only to the impact of the service we perform for the benefit of the communities in which we live and serve. Creating healthy clubs means creating value that breathes strength and vitality into clubs to keep them healthy. The overarching goal of service is to create value for all stakeholders as the foundation for excellence. This foundation for excellence rests on 5 value-creating dimensions of service. These dimensions are service by the club that generates value and benefits for the communities and those we serve. We're all familiar with that. Service by members whose contributions create value for clubs to enable clubs to create value for the community. Service by the club that creates value for members in terms of giving them a personally rewarding membership experience that will boost their commitment and engagement. Service by leaders that produces value in contributions that empower and enable members of a club to achieve shared goals for long-term club health and sustainability. And finally, service that builds and maintains a value-driven environment that establishes the foundation for developing and maintaining the unifying conditions necessary for holding clubs together as a functioning and integrated whole. There are 2 major processes at work in managing clubs. The first is club building. Club building forges agreements among members on the fundamentals that create the foundation for conducting club operations. I'm going to refer to these fundamentals as first principles. The second is club operations. We are all familiar with this. It is entirely the focus of most leaders. Club administration. Club operations is focused on executing the functions for conducting the business of the club and delivering mission-related outcomes, all within the framework of first principles created by the club building process. Suffice it to say that clubs do not operate in a vacuum. Clubs are built by members who often have wide-ranging differences in points of view and needs. They have differences in ideas, differences in aspirations, and differences in needs, just to name a few. However, in order to build an enabling environment for club function, in order for any club to function effectively, members must have a shared understanding of the purpose that will unite them and develop consensus and commitment to certain first principles necessary to achieve the purpose. First principles create the conditions necessary for members to work together to achieve their common purpose. No club can function effectively without agreement and a shared understanding of those first principles. Here are the first principles on which consensus or agreement is absolutely required for club building to take place. And this is club building, not club operations. Members have to agree on the mission that will define the purpose of the club. And I'll talk a little more about this later on, because many of you will say, we all understand the mission. And I can assure you that we understand the mission of service. I can assure you that there's a great deal of misunderstanding about that. But I'll cover that a little later. But this is the first principle, understanding the mission that will define the purpose of clubs. The second is we must define how clubs will govern themselves. This includes a governance structure, a shared understanding of the important roles and responsibilities of club officers and committees, and other provisions for club guidance. You know this to be the club constitution and bylaws that prescribes the way in which clubs would govern themselves. That is the second first principle, if you will. The third principle is that we must agree on a shared direction for our club. You know this to be a strategic plan. What exactly is a strategic direction? A strategic direction includes a vision and its defining attributes, the core values and guiding principles for conducting the business of a club, a strategic focus that defines in what areas the club will concentrate its efforts and resources, strategic goals that will set out broad aspirations that provide a framework for annual operating goals. A club must first have a direction before we are able to set annual operating goals. Critical success factors that define what clubs must do well for the club to thrive. But that is not all. We must agree on policies that provide guidance in decision-making and define what is expected of members in terms of the behavior, actions, and processes when conducting the business of the club. We must agree on standards that translate the values of the club into criteria that define what is desirable and acceptable in terms of performance and roles and personal conduct of members. These standards define acceptable levels of performance and conduct. They define success, and they define the criteria for recognizing and rewarding performance. Finally, first principles include self-regulating mechanisms as part of the policies and guidelines. It deals with ways in which clubs set in place checks and balances to deal with club dysfunctions. How do we keep members accountable? How do we deal with members whose behavior is inconsistent with the behavior for building productive relationships and teamwork? All these elements constitute the foundation on which we build operations. Clubs cannot thrive with differences on first principles, like mission, core values, and direction. They cannot thrive when members have different ideas about what the guidance is that is provided by policies, or what standards prescribe for performance, or the conduct and behavior of members. There must be agreement on the conduct that is necessary to foster productive relationships and collaboration among members. No club can thrive without these elements. To be sure, it must be understood that simply agreeing on first principles will not by itself enable a club to thrive and build an enabling environment. Members must be able to bring the first principles to life by their actions and by living up to the obligations that have to be fulfilled to create the conditions necessary for effective club functioning. It is one thing to agree to standards of behavior. It is quite another thing for members to live up to those standards so that the club can function as an integrated whole. Over time, there's a breakdown in these first principles, the shared understanding that is necessary to hold clubs together. The reality is that clubs are made up of human beings who, for various reasons, do not always do what is expected or required of them for the good of the club. But more than that, groups of people working together often informally evolve patterns of behavior and rules and standards that become woven into the fabric of clubs as part of its culture. These patterns of behaviors and practices, often referred to as norms, that's a word from psychology, become adopted within clubs as accepted practice without any explicit approval by the group. Some norms serve the best interests of clubs by introducing ways of conducting the business that are constructive. But other norms are the product of degraded standards that become the accepted way of doing things. Group norms and the adopted practices embraced by clubs determine and influence what clubs value. They influence how members conduct themselves. They influence how leaders lead. And they influence how the club conducts its business. The bottom line is that the environment created by our first principles tend to degenerate in quality over time based on undesirable norms, behaviors, actions that become the accepted way of doing things. The erosion in the integrity of first principles that occur over time create two overarching challenges for clubs. The first is a general breakdown in shared agreement on what is necessary to create the conditions that need to exist to hold clubs together and for people to work together based upon a common purpose. The second is a breakdown in good management practices that lead to club dysfunctions. Clubs facing these challenges need to return to basics to answer some fundamental questions about their club and its future. They need to decide what things they should stop doing that are undermining the membership environment in which it wants to cultivate. It needs to continue doing and reinforcing the kind of membership environment it wants to create. And it needs to start doing things to nurture and cultivate the kind of membership environment it wants to create. So clubs will be well served. Clubs that are experiencing problems, chronic problems, over many, many years, need to review and develop consensus on their first principles that establish the conditions for effective club functioning and bring them into alignment with current realities. Let's take a look at actions we need to take to address the breakdown in consensus and understanding related to first principles that are adversely affecting the functioning of clubs. Let's take mission. If I ask you what our mission is, you would all say service. But here is the problem. We need to develop a new consensus and commitment to our mission by overcoming many misunderstandings about why we serve and what service is. The mission of service involves several service components. Many members pick and choose which components represent service for them. As a result, many clubs fail to get the engagement of members because their idea of service is limited to delivering service projects to the community. But service is centered not just on the creation of value for service recipients, but on value for the club, for members, by leaders, and our international association. Yes, service to the community at large is service, but so is service to the club in terms of service and committees. That too is service. Acceptance of positions of responsibility is service. Supporting the club financially is service. Fundraising for service projects is service. And contributions to LCIF is service. This is what service means if we are lions. These are the elements of service to which we commit upon joining our association. That is a service commitment we make when we become lions. And that is what our service mission means. Club governance. On the subject of governance, we need to clarify how we need to govern ourselves by reconciling the shared role of members and presidents and the boards in the governing process. In many respects, Lions Club presidents have co-opted the role of the membership to set the direction for clubs' future development. The proper role of the president is to help a club achieve its aspirations as a group. It is not to substitute his or her personal aspirations for the entire membership. The end result of this ongoing practice is that clubs are pulled each year in a different direction by different presidents. Clubs are starting over every year with a new leadership agenda. The club membership as a group must set a long-term direction that reflects the aspirations of members and continue on this defined path with annual goals set by the president with input from members. A strategic direction. What does that mean? Clubs should undertake an exercise to chart the direction for clubs. This means making strategic choices for the long term by the club's membership, not a set of annual goals set by the president. Strategic direction is the path forward that the club defines to carry out its mission and to which annual goals need to be aligned. Direction includes several elements, and those of you who are familiar with strategic planning will know what those elements are. They include a vision that defines the kind of club you want to develop. They include core values that define standards and principles that the club will apply when conducting its affairs. It defines a focus on which the club will concentrate. By that, we mean that some clubs may have programs dealing with diabetes and so on. Clubs don't do everything. They have a strategic focus in terms of how they're going to carry out the mission related to the needs of the community in which they live. Key success factors that deal with the critical things that a club must succeed at doing in order to succeed. For example, a club must understand that its success depends upon its membership strength, not just the number of members it has. A club must understand that to be successful, it is a question of the impact of its service projects on those people that it serves. It must know that its community reputation and image in the community is a factor that's very important because it affects how the club is perceived by the public and how a positive image can enhance the contributions that the public is willing to make to the support of a club. Policies that provide overarching guidance for making decisions is an important piece of the equation. And importantly, standards. Clubs need to develop standards that translate the values of the club into criteria that define what is desirable and acceptable. Performance standards define acceptable levels of performance for operating functions and for the roles and responsibilities carried out by officers and committees. Performance standards provide a consistent set of standards for recognizing and rewarding performance, not a set of standards that change every year based upon who the president is. No organization, success is success. Success can be one thing one year and something different the next year. So standards for success in a club and for reward must be a set of consistent criteria that defines what success is. And the president should not be the person making the selection for these kinds of things. A committee needs to be formed that would apply the standards basically when there's a need to make selections for people who need to be recognized. And many clubs in Zionism do this. You know, they outline in their bylaws what awards are going to be given to members. Not every president deciding what awards are to be given. Behavioral standards are very important to establish a code of conduct that enable desirable interactions and promote and maintain productive relationships that support team collaboration. Many of you know the effect of destructive behavior, toxic behavior, and how it creates a negative impact on members who finally elect to leave our organization. Clubs are self-regulating bodies. That is to say, not only do we have constitutions, we also have to have checks and balances to deal with issues that pop up. When people don't behave in the proper way, we have to have interventions. We have to have ground rules that would stipulate what the conduct is. And we need to have sanctions that are applied to people who don't live up to what the standards are. We need to be able to deal with individuals who accept positions but do nothing. And these guidelines are important to be maintained because people who accept positions and who are not accountable for their non-performance offer no value to a club. They're not the kind of people who are role models for association. And the question would be what contribution such people are willing to make for the good of a club. Strategic planning. Clubs should update their governance structures and first principles to facilitate the process necessary for clubs to agree and update their first principles. This is necessary to ensure that there is assigned responsibility for strategic planning to ensure that it becomes a part of the management of clubs. Many constitutions of clubs and maybe of districts have no provision whatsoever for strategic planning that allows a club to decide on the long-term direction of the club so that it can be the framework for annual goals that are consistent with whatever the direction is. No organization can keep going around in circles and expect to succeed over the long term. Clubs should undertake to ensure that their constitutions provide for a strategic planning committee as a standing committee. This committee should oversee annual club assessments and compile this data into trends for the benefit of sitting presidents and club boards, incoming presidents, zone chairs, and the district governor. It should oversee the periodic strategic planning exercise to develop a 3 to 5 year strategic plan with the aid of an outside facilitator to keep the plan updated at least every other year. The strategic goals in the plan should provide mandatory guidance for club presidents in setting annual goals. This committee should oversee an annual club retreat at which the incoming president will present his or her program for the year after reviewing data trends and get input of the clubs before annual goals are finalized. Each individual president cannot by himself or herself determine the destiny of the members of a club. The committee should be mandated to conduct annual club assessments to inform the annual program of the incoming president and the oversight work by zone chairs. What about districts? Districts should do the same thing. Districts should have a strategic planning committee that embraces the same basic concept so that there's a framework that is agreed upon so that the sitting district governor can make his or her annual goals within the larger framework of a district's strategic plan. The exercise must be synchronized to take place prior to the end of the year of the outgoing district governor, so that the input of the outgoing cabinet and the incoming cabinet can be solicited before goals are finalized. Those of you who are becoming new governors will know that Lions Club International is now indicating that the consultation should be made with the outgoing district officers in framing goals. But that process should also include the incoming cabinet, not just the outgoing cabinet. So things that need to change to improve good management practice, in addition to these first principles. I'm going to give some examples of management practices. I mean, the list is so long, I'll just give some examples. We need to take care of the first principles that I've outlined because they create the foundation on which a club carries out its operations. There's a need to retool and recalibrate management practices in clubs as an imperative for achieving higher degrees of club effectiveness. Here are a few. Setting recruitment standards. In many respects, clubs create their own membership problems. by making recruitment decisions without reference to standards and criteria that ensure that members can fulfill their membership obligations. There was a time when I first joined Lions, where Lions Clubs International would specify what the obligations of membership are. And when you were inducted, you had to basically indicate that you would subscribe to the obligations of membership. I noticed that many of the membership installation ceremonies no longer include what these obligations are. But for your benefit, I'd like to let you know what they used to be and what they probably still are. When selecting members, it is important for a club to gain reasonable assurance that an incoming member is ready, willing, and able to fulfill the obligations of membership of our association. At a minimum, these obligations are, you'll recognize some of them, abiding by the Lions Code of Ethics, participating in activities, meetings, and functions of the club, helping the club by actively serving on committees, serving in other capacities, including higher office, where the efforts are needed, assisting in maintaining, building, and strengthening the club, the membership of the club, and in efforts to raise funds for service projects, paying club dues when due, and contributing their fair share to the programs of the club, district, and Lions Clubs International. I can assure you, just looking at these obligations, if every committee tried to reassure itself in recruiting members that they will fulfill these obligations, we will have fewer problems with respect to people not wanting to serve on committees, people basically saying, I don't do fundraising, I just want to serve on projects. It's very important that we select members who are able to fulfill the obligations of membership. This is not some physics or some high science. It is just common sense. You need members who can fulfill the obligations of membership for a club to function effectively. Another management practice has to do with decision making. Most of the decisions that we make in our clubs are based upon hunches and opinions and so on. No, there's no effort to gather data so that we try to make our decisions based upon the best available data that there is. Problem solving should focus on the causes, not symptoms. And there must be clear connection between the solution adopted and the cause. We have been having problems in our clubs for many years. And we look at the symptoms and we say, oh, this is a membership problem, or this is a leadership problem. I'm suggesting to you that some of the problems we have to do with a breakdown basically in these principles that are there. Not understanding the mission. There's no agreement on how we should govern ourselves. There's no direction on where we should be heading as a club or as a district. There are no standards in place to govern performance. These are the first principles that have broken down in our clubs that we need to reinstitute to build the health of our clubs. Reports by committees should be performance-driven. And as a first priority, they should address the following: what has been achieved to date, the progress being made towards the goals that have been set, the challenges that are faced, and the actions to be taken to address them. All of the other stuff is window dressing. how many club members we have, how many, what's in this zone, what's in that. The question basically about the committee is what was accomplished, what is the progress towards goals, what are the challenges being faced, and what actions are being taken to address them. Accountability. Non-performers should be held accountable for their actions. They should be given the opportunity to improve, but in the final analysis, they should be removed from office for the larger good of the club, for failing to act in the best interest of the club. They are a poor example of what is required of a lion leader. Still on the subject of management practices, let's look at club meetings, both club and district meetings. The purpose of a club or district meeting is to monitor administrative progress and make administrative decisions, to monitor programs and the progress being made to achieve program objectives, to make program decisions on matters that have a bearing on the club forward direction and momentum. Meetings should be managed to respect the value of the time of members. Time limits should be set for agenda items, and a maximum time limit should be set for adjournment. Club meetings are not the place to conduct committee work. Matters requiring more information or requiring research and further study should be referred to an appropriate committee for recommendation to the full membership. My concluding statement is the following. The state of our clubs is a reflection of how we have failed to create the type of clubs we are capable of creating. This is a reflection of our refusal to make what happens in our clubs consistent with the high aspirations we have for them. The good news is that the condition of our clubs today is not a reflection of our possibilities. Our imperative is to serve today for a better tomorrow. But that must be built on a unified commitment to the first principles that create the foundation for effective club functioning. As Alliance leaders, we're not just building a better future for our clubs. We're building their future today. Thank you very much for listening. And I am open to respond to any questions that you might have.
Good evening, Lions. If you could, please put your questions in the chat. I will turn over this section to our District Governor, Lion Ingrid Andrews Campbell, to be the moderator of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lion Iris. Thank you, PCC Malcolm, for bringing to life some of the issues that you've asked and you have mentioned. In several of the zone reports on the club's performance, they have mentioned some common traits. And one of them I think you have touched on, and that's the participation, especially among the club officers. Half of the membership turn up to meetings, half of the members perform. And as you say, it goes back to that founding principle. I wonder if they can put their questions and ask how can they deal with some of the problems that they have sent to myself and the GAT team when they talk about communication among club members, how we communicate. And you mentioned about how we communicate our goals, how do we communicate where our clubs are going. I strongly believe in what you're saying, that you have to plan. If we don't plan for success, then we are planning for our club's failure. We need to know where we are as a club, do our membership satisfaction, do our club needs assessment, to see how we can create that better tomorrow. Hence, that's why I use the team leading today for better tomorrow, because it all boils down to leadership. In our district, we're strong on service. We're not as strong on leadership. So I like for the zones, especially who have been visiting with their clubs and the regions, to please take this opportunity to field your questions to PCC Malcolm. As PCC Malcolm said, his passion is leadership, so is mine. PCC Malcolm is, as you travel along your Lions journey, you meet individual mentors and Lions who shape you to become the kind of leader that you are. I can boldly say this evening that I'm so happy to welcome one of my mentors to our district. PCC Malcolm was a past governor. I've served along with him in my old district, sub-district 60B. And I can say because of him, he's one of the person who has influenced my life's journey. And you can see the type of leader that I've turned out to be. Some of you may say I'm no nonsense. Some of you may say that I'm arrogant. Some of you may say that I'm hard. And I speak the same language as PCC Malcolm because that's how I know it. He was my faculty member when I went to the Regional Leadership Institute. And I'm just talking to give you times. Are you ready with questions, Lion Iris? So we can get moving? Please take this opportunity to really look at
in the chat section. So we may want to ask individuals to unmute themselves and announce who they are, but
and
I don't
give their
see
questions
in the chats.
Yeah. If I may align, Ingrid.
Go ahead.
If members in a club are not engaged, there's a reason why they're not engaged. Most people who feel good about attending meetings, who feel that the experience is a positive one, are going to come to meetings. So people who are not coming to meetings need to have some assurance that the climate within clubs will change to provide a more positive environment for them to attend meetings. And so that is why it is important for clubs to forget about some of this stuff about people not attending meetings and return to what is the cause? How do we begin to address reducing a caustic environment and creating that caustic and changing that to a more enabling environment for people? You just can't talk to them and say you need to come to meetings. We have to make a change. And if we say, well, listen, we need to set some ground rules about what is acceptable conduct, and then we have to enforce those ground rules and be prepared to impose sanctions on individuals who are not assisting the club in creating a climate that will create positive relationships, productive relationships that would enable teamwork. So it's very important that we understand that part of the issue with respect to participation and engagement is a psychological one for members. People just don't serve. Service is not free. People expect to experience certain rewarding feelings. They need to feel that they belong. They need to feel that their opinion counts. They need to feel that they're respected. So if people are not getting the psychological rewards from their membership, then they're not likely to participate in the functioning of clubs. We have to understand this psychological component that people expect in return for their membership. I'm going to give you my service, but in return, I need to feel that I'm accepted in this club. I'm an important part of it. I'm kept informed. My opinion counts. You know, I'm respected by my fellow members, etc. So that's the exchange that is important in clubs. You need to understand that there's this psychological component that's got to be fulfilled for members. Any questions?
I agree with you, because I always say a satisfied member never leave a club.
Yeah.
And the other issue that was coming out, if there are no questions that I would like to bring that were reported by the zones, communication. And I think it touched back to what you say, how they communicate with their members when they come to club. If they receive communications from the club of what is happening, if I'm not communicated with, then I may not feel that I'm being accepted. My presence is not missed because nobody sends me minutes, etc. I also agree with you on the zone advisory meeting. For the second zone advisory meeting, I did ask the zones to look at what progress I've made since they last visited the club and to talk about the challenges that they're having and the actions they need to take. Recently, we did our SWOT analysis that we had to submit to LCIF for the GMA, and a little over 50% or almost 60% of our clubs participated in the SWOT analysis. And I'm sure that some of them may have questions on how they can work on their weaknesses, and I hope that they'll take this opportunity to ask about it. Are there any questions? Lionel, anyone want to unmute and ask any questions?
Good evening. We have two questions in the chat. We have a question from Lion Pearl. Let me see if I can find her. Lion Pearl John asks, what can be done when even after intervention, toxic behavior continues from a leader?
Well, importantly, when ground rules are set by a club, there should be sanctions and a due process that is actually, that will be invoked when people persist, even if it is, I mean, some decisions may be very difficult, but you have to have ground rules. I think not ground rules that are instituted by a president, ground rules that are accepted by the club. That's the first thing. If you're going to have ground rules, the ground rules have to be the club's ground rules. The second thing is you have to have sanctions and due process. First, a warning, some indication as to what will happen if it can't persist, etc. And then being willing and able to invoke the sanctions that have been applied with the club support. So it is not easy to have to say that sometimes we have to invoke sanctions against people who are part of the brotherhood or sisterhood. But it is sometimes necessary for the good of the club. Because if someone is enabling a toxic environment, it's no longer just about that person. It is about everybody else. And one of the things that has happened in Lions is that we have become ready to accept, maybe not accept, but tolerate toxic behavior in our clubs. But whether you accept or tolerate it, it creates a negative environment that people experience. As long as it exists, it affects the environment that people serve. So we have to be able to have the courage to say, listen, this is something that cannot continue. But it has to be a club initiative, not just an initiative, but it has to be ground rules agreed to, hashed out by the membership that says, these are the ground rules to which members need to subscribe. These are the sanctions. This is the due process that will be applied. And that's it.
PCC Malcolm, can you also touch on accountability a bit more? How do we make our members accountable? You know, when you install them as officers, they swear to obey the Constitution and bylaws. And as you refer to it on Ground Rules 1, but how do we make officers accountable for what they say they're going to do, whether it's at the club or district level?
Well, I have a theory about some people who accept office. And my theory is that some people, their motive is really not to serve in the position that they accept. Their goal is to become past whatever it is. In other words, their goal isn't really to be a zone chair. Their goal is to be a past zone chair. So that for all their life, they will have the title of past zone chair. And sooner or later, people would forget that they didn't really do much of anything when they were serving. But I have known several district governors in 60B who have removed people from office for non-performance in the middle of a year. It's not something that's done very often, but you have, again, the whole notion of due process, accountability. You sit people down, you don't start out with any threats. You basically say, listen, we're counting you. It's very important that we get your contributions. Please let me know if you're going to be able to continue in this position and do A, B, C, and D. Quite apart from what they did at the beginning, is an intervention that basically says, let's talk. There are certain objectives. Will you be able to achieve these objectives? Do you have the time? Do you have the commitment to do this? Or would you like to be relieved of the position? So you have these kinds of conversations before more severe action is taken. And, but, you know, again, we have to be willing to take tough decisions, but we have to engage the person, you know, and say, talk to me. Is this something you really want to do? Here's what is at stake in terms of the zone that you take. If there's no oversight, these are the negative problems for the district. And you may want to offer some, you know, we know that you can do this. I mean, if you made some judgments about the person's commitment, sometimes we select the wrong people for position. That's another issue, you know, really. And we talk about what people say. I'm the kind of person, I look at what you have done. I know one of the challenges we have today in Lionism is that you don't have enough good people to fill positions, and you have to be accepting people who are less than able to really perform the responsibilities.
That's a big challenge indeed.
Yes. So
I removed one of my zones. I'm on the verge of almost removing another one as well. I did give the person time. I said, how can I help you? What can I do? And I relieved one, and I asked the region to continue. I think I may relieve the other one because it's been 6 weeks and I haven't heard anything that has changed. What about at the club level?
In terms of what? In terms of
club officers not performing at the club level. You have membership chairs not looking at you have secretaries and treasurers not talking to their presidents before they come to the meetings, and then they're having a meeting within a meeting at the club level.
Well, yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
What about members who are bringing? Hi, good night. This is Jesmo from Metropolis Lands Club. I have a question pertaining to members who are bringing negative aura to the club and doing. Is it possible, or is there any way that, I don't know for Lions, but from a holistic point of view, that you dismembership members? To add to that question that District Governor asked.
Well, certainly. Again, there must be due process. You have to have. First of all, you have to have the guidelines, whatever the ground rules are, agreed to by the membership, and you have to have sanctions that will be imposed, and you need to have the due process. The due process is very important because you don't want to be arbitrary in taking actions, severe actions against people. But certainly, based upon that, a recommendation is made for the person to be dropped. The constitution that you have should provide for being able to dismiss members for various causes, and you invoke that, but after due process is employed. So you have the ground rules, you have the sanctions, you have due process.
Could you explain what some due process could be?
Well, due process might be after the first incident, we'll talk to you. And if there's no improvement, the second time, there'll be a warning that says, if you persist, these are the actions that are going to be taken. And then thirdly, you might say, we'll have to suspend you. And fourthly, you say we'll have to arrange for you to be removed from the club. So due process is a stage situation where different kinds of sanctions of increasing severity are employed in dealing with a particular situation.
I have a question. Good evening.
Yes.
I'm Lam Balsia. Great presentation, PCC Malcolm. My question is, if like most organizations, clubs, they have their cliques. If you're in an organization, the club, and you're experiencing bullying, disrespect, and you outline and you have proof to show this, and you take it to your leader, and it is not addressed for some reason, how do you deal with that?
Well, again, we get back to a leader really doesn't have any grounds to address some of these situations apart from talking to the member. If the club has not agreed to ground rules, that is very important. It's the club that must speak, and the president would then act on behalf of the club. The president hands are tied. The president just can't act on his own. So the club has got to agree to the standards of conduct that the club is willing to accept, not the president. So what the president should do, in response to your question, is basically to say, listen, we need to get the club to adopt something. He or she can take the initiative for that to happen. And that's what the president should do. And then the same procedure outlined, we outline what the ground rules are, what the sanctions are, what the due process is, and move forward. But generally, a president can't act on his own apart from talking to somebody, unless the club as a group says, these are the ground rules. Remember, presidents, in my presentation, I talk a lot about presidents doing A and presidents doing B without the approval of the club. Presidents can't just act on their own. They have to be carrying out mandates from the membership. So that the president should really, but again, maybe the president is not aware of what ground rules are. May you have all kinds of issues, so somebody might have to say to the president, listen, the way to deal with this situation is we need to have some ground rules, debate it among the members, and agree. But sometimes presidents really don't know what to do. And they don't understand that this is a mechanism that can help to diffuse a situation like that. I hope that helps. And most of the questions that are being asked, it really goes back to the same basic thing. Behavior of members who are undermining the positive climate that members want to have in their clubs so that that can remain engaged and have a satisfying experience when they interact with their fellow members.
PCC Malcolm, can you talk a bit more on healthy clubs and membership commitment? And I like how you break down serving, because people think, as you say, serving is just about doing actual hands-on service or checkbook service. They don't understand that serving is also being committed to taking on responsibility, paying dues, fundraising, accepting leadership positions. They say, I'll just come to volunteer. It's just a volunteer organization.
Yeah. Well, first of all, an important part of the challenge has to do with what do we say to people when we're recruiting them. I am sure that most clubs do not, in fact, address this whole matter of what service means. All we talk about is these projects that we do for the less fortunate, etc. So we're starting off with an issue where people are not informed as to what service means. That's the first problem. The second problem is that even if you do many things in an orientation and you say, this is what you should do, this is what you should do, etc. People generally take their cues from what they see and hear. So if I'm in a club and you're telling me about all these great things and serve it, and then there are other members, older members who are not doing what it is, people are going to be guided by what they see and by what other people do. It isn't just what you tell people, you know, oh, we are a great club. I mean, when you come into your club, I'm going to look around and see what's going on. That's going to tell me what kind of club this is not what I'm told in an orientation or what I'm told when I'm being recruited. Oh, you know, we do all these great things for the community, etc., etc. No one talks about what service means. And so that's part of the issue. First, telling people what the truth about clubs, the challenges that you face, and also importantly, trying to create a climate in a club. This is like people say, well, listen, you're asking me as a new member to do this, but all these older members, look at what they're doing. So people are guided very often by what they see and what they hear, not just by what you tell them. So that's that piece. You did ask another question.
Yes, in terms of leaders, we talk about service, and you made a valuable point of when we talk about service, we also mean leaders accepting responsibilities. Absolutely. And actually doing what they say Indeed. They're going to do. You make a pledge to serve your club.
Yes, but you have to explain what we mean by service. That's the point. You see, we have to explain what I am working in LCIF right now. And many people would say, I don't consider contributions to LCIF a service. No, you know, that's their particular orientation. And that they didn't just think about that in responding to me. This is something that has been ingrained in them over the years because no one has basically said that service embraces the contribution you make to your club, serving on committees. Some people say, listen, I didn't join this club to raise funds. I raised this club too. So who is supposed to raise the funds? So we have to do a better job. That's why I go back to first principles. People need to understand the mission. You can't just say the mission is to serve. You have to say what service is and means in a Lions Club. Otherwise, you're going to have people who have disparate ideas about what service is, but you want to bring everybody on the same page and say, everybody here understands what service means. Now, it is true that people may say, oh, I understand, but when they enter the club, they do something different. But at least you must take care of the first thing, that they understand what service means in a Lions Club.
PCC, Malcolm, I have a last question, or
yes.
I need some help with this. I heard you mention about persons taking positions and not performing in that role. What
yes.
about a person that is vibrant, knowledgeable, passionate, and wants to serve in that position, but when they try to be a part of that position, and you're a new member, and the senior persons that are there but not stepping up to the plate and not holding the positions, not serving, but you are passionate and you are willing to do the service, but not getting the assistance or the because you have to work as a team, so you can't do it alone. How can you get through that without being demotivated or not wanting to leave the position or step down from the position because of lack of support?
You make a very important point. I happen to be a person who doesn't believe that. Well, first of all, let me put it over what I believe. What I believe is that we need to, as leaders, we need to be able to make judgments about people who are willing to commit to making Lions clubs a better place to be. And that has nothing to do with seniority. Many people who are senior, they simply lay back. We need to identify and encourage people who are vibrant, engaged, committed to take on positions of responsibility. It should not be, I do not believe in turns, whose turn it is to do this or whose turn it is to that based upon seniority. It is about people's commitment to contribute to the good of the club. And we have to make some tough choices sometimes. Do we choose somebody simply based upon seniority, knowing that the person is really not going to be doing a good job anyway? Or do we choose a younger person? When I joined my club a long time ago, the second year I was elected treasurer of my club. And in part because in those days, people were elected position. Well, for the whole recruitment process was really about a club deciding internally what are our needs, what are our membership needs. So we need to get some accountants in the club, we need to get people in management, we need to get a lawyer, we need to get somebody in public relations who's actually in public relations. In my day, that's how we ran our clubs. We brought people, so it wasn't a question of everybody thinking they can be a treasurer, because we determined that we wanted to, like a business. You know, we ran into our club like a business. We need accountants, we need all these things. I think we should go back to that kind of stuff so that we have competent people in positions. And we don't do that anymore. We think everybody can serve in a particular position. I know some stories, I can tell you people some stories about things that happened in my club years later. We had a guy from Vitelco who was the public relations officer for Vitelco. He was the vice president, knew everybody, all the TV people, etc., etc. And he was the person we selected. You know, he was always willing to be the public relations officer for our club. He knew everybody. You know, we can, if you all you have to do is talk to him, he'd go and talk to people to make contributions to the club, etc. He knew. And somebody, I remember, got up and said, well, why is this person being elected to selected for this position? Shouldn't we give other people a chance? This chance word is, to me, is a real problem. So the club finally selected somebody else because the guy got disenchanted. He said, I don't want to take on any position and be criticized like this. So we got someone. What do you think happened? Our revenues went down. We couldn't get our notices and so on the radio and TV. This guy, he knew, he was a person of influence in the community. He was a public relations officer for Vitel, one of the largest companies in the Virgin Islands. And then you get somebody who's a school teacher who says, well, I want that position. And what happens? They don't know the people. So I happen to believe in clubs that try to specialize in bringing people into position. This person is a good fundraiser, or this person is whatever. So, so the point you're making about do we use merit as the basis for people advancing in position? Should it be based on merit, or should it be based on some other criteria? I vote in favor of merit, but every president who has to make a selection is not going to be basing those decisions on merit. They're going to take into account the politics of the club, etc. I'm the kind of person, I'm strong enough to be able to make my decision, and whatever it is. Unfortunately, as I said, people don't always make decisions based upon merit, based upon who my friend is, or how long they've been in the club, or some other kinds of considerations, and then the club suffers as a result of not making decisions based upon merit. That's why standards are, yes.
Oh, I thought you finished. We have a question. Ahead. We have a question from our GMA champion chairperson, PDG Jackie. I know she recently completed a SWOT analysis, and she has a few questions for you.
Absolutely.
PDG Jackie, you can unmute.
Yes. Good evening, PCC Malcolm, and thank you for your time and for the presentation this evening. The Lion that just spoke, Lion Valcia, I think it was, raised a part of this issue of how to handle transition and change in leadership, and you've certainly answered with what I believe to be right on target, right on track for clubs, in that you have to have a discussion about skill sets when you're looking at your elections and looking at changes in leadership in a club, even growth and development for younger leaders. What I would ask of you is, with the zones and the club presidents that are on the line today, we're approaching the election season, and what guidance would you give for the club presidents or the new zones as they speak to their nominating committees, as they speak to their boards, about how you approach the process when a club has gone askew, as some have, where people repeat in positions because they have that popular vote in the club, versus whether they are really committed, versus whether they're really in the right position in the club.
Okay. Am I to understand that zone chairs are elected?
No, our zone chairs have the opportunity to guide their clubs that they're
zone chairs are appointed.
Oh, okay, all right, okay, all right, yeah.
I think she's talking about club officers. Are you speaking about at the club officers level, PDG Jackie?
Well, we have a number of clubs where the clubs might reach out, and this happens a lot. The club presidents or other officers in the club will reach out during the election process to get some advice on what they should do within that process of selecting new leadership. And sometimes they don't, because they're afraid to do so. They're not sure what type of things they can say, what the best approach might be to shake up a club, and to also make sure that we're not repeating leaders who have really have stayed over their time in those positions?
Well, it's important for a zone chair, for example, to understand that they play a very important advisory role, a mentorship role in working with the presidents of clubs. If I were an incoming zone chair and I wanted to engage an incoming president, the first thing has got to be a relationship building. It is not because you're coming in and thinking, this is what I'm going to do, these are my goals, etc. It's about building a relationship, listening to that incoming president. What are the challenges you're facing? How can I help you? You need to listen before you talk, so that when you talk, you are addressing the issues and concerns. When you do that, you're going to be able to get a whole lot of other things from that president. So the relationship building, to me, is the first important step. And responding in some constructive way to the issues on which the president needs to get some advice and some help. And the technical assistance that you can draw on from other members and say, listen, well, I know someone in the district who can help you with this. Would you be willing to talk to this individual? So it's a kind of building a little network for the incoming president, including building a relationship with that person, to me, would be a valuable way of approaching that kind of problem. Jackie, I don't know if I
No, thank you. We just hope that as clubs get ready to think about their leadership going forward, that sometimes some really frank conversations need to take place. And it's not so easy sometimes within a club where the culture is struggling.
Yeah, that's quite true.
So sometimes they do reach out, and we hope that our zones will feel comfortable offering some insights, some thoughts on how to go forward.
Yes.
Look for skill sets.
Yeah, indeed.
Malcolm, I'm glad that you
in
mentioned
addition
that,
to,
because
it's important for the zone shader to reach out and not just always wait.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to me, you should reach out because you have a role to play. And to me, building that relationship is going to facilitate your ability to execute on that role. And so you need to allow the person to understand that you are going to be an asset for him or her. People always want to succeed. And so if you position yourself as someone who can help somebody succeed, you're much more likely to get that person's engagement with you in the whole process of the zone share presidential relationship. So.
Good evening.
Malcolm, it's also important for that building of relationship, because sometimes you have new zones who they may have skills, merit, but they haven't had relationships with that club before. So I told my zones at the start of the year, the first thing you do is to build that relationship. And once you build that relationship, going to them about paying dues, going to them about reporting would come easier than you just start bombarding, because in terms of relationship, people relate better to something they know. People know they go to Home Depot because they want to have building supplies. They're not going to go to McDonald's. They know if they want fast food, they go to McDonald's. So it's about building that relationship. And if I go to a store and I got a jug of milk and it was sour, I'm not going to go back to that store to purchase another jug of milk.
Indeed. And importantly, you see, if I have a certain number of things on my mind, for example, suppose I'm interacting, a zone chair coming in and I'm dealing with a president. I have the record on that club in terms of a whole lot of issues, et cetera, et cetera. I wouldn't go in with a whole lot of advice to do. I would explore and say, well, you know, what are some things I can do for you? I said, do you have a membership dues problem that you may need some help with? And based upon how you deal with that situation, you're going to be able to get the person to engage you. So you don't always have to prescribe what you want to do. You ask a question and say, you know, is this something you need some help on? Rather than saying, you know, being prescriptive in your approach, you use a more diplomatic way of getting to the problems and aligning yourself with that individual as someone who is there to support them, not just criticize them, you know. So that's very important in terms of the approach. People need to know how to approach people to get what they want to have done. There was a question
you had
from
a question?
Correct. We have a question from GST Coordinator Line Jennifer. What is your position of a person who, I'm trying to think, what is your position of a person who would like to, who officially takes off from his or her club, but still wants to actively function at the district level? Can this be possible?
I'm not clear. The person is no longer in their club, did you say?
It sounds like they're in their club, but they may have said to their club, I'm taking a break, but yet they're still want to be active on the district level. So they might be in a district position or want to do district stuff, but they don't want to be active with their club.
I'm not sure there's really any prohibition. As long as the person is a member in a club, I'm not sure there's really a prohibition on that person making a contribution at the district level. I don't think making a contribution at the club level is a precondition for being able to serve in the Lions movement at the district level. So the district governor would need to be privy to what the situation is and to make a judgment about how that person could be an asset and still make a contribution to Lionism.
Thank you for your response.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I guess I'm in a similar situation. I mean, the question you just asked, here's my situation. I have moved from St. Thomas to Florida. I have remained a member of my club. I do not want to. I've talked to the club about it. You know, I pay my dues. I can attend some meetings online. So I'm not there to do a whole lot of service things, etc. But I still hold positions at the international level. I still, so I'm not there on the ground in my club. But, you know, I'm talking to you guys tonight, for example. I mean, I do a lot of work with LCIF. I was just in Puerto Rico in November with the Lion Douglas to look at the damage. And so I'm still doing work for Lions, even though I'm not in the ground in St. Thomas. So, I mean.
Hi, Iris, is there another question?
Yeah.
Yes, there's a question from, this is from Lion Randy P. His question is, how do you convince senior members in your club, I guess, to adopt some of these ways of leadership when some of them don't see there's anything wrong in either the leadership style or the culture of the club? I mean, yeah, I'm guessing that's what their question is.
Would you repeat it, please? I'm not sure. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. I'm just trying to paraphrase the.
Yeah, certainly.
Yes. If Lion Randy P, if you could unmute yourself, because I want to make sure I say your question correctly. But it reads, very important discussion going on, but how to convince the senior person to adopt these things. So I'm guessing about leadership. When some of them don't see anything is wrong, I'm assuming with the club, meanwhile there is.
That is correct.
Okay.
I was just wondering, how would you convince leaders that they don't see that there's a problem right now, but
they don't see a problem with
most of these styles are they need to adapt most of the information that you have put out here tonight, well, between you and the other persons in the discussion, but they're not convinced that anything is wrong. So
yeah.
How would you go about?
Okay, well, I have found in dealing with any person, it all depends on who talks to the person. So if some junior person is going to talk to that individual, they're probably going to get some resistance. It needs to be, when you're trying to influence people, you have to be in a position of influence. And by position, I don't mean the post that you have or whatever. It has to do very often with the nature of the relationship you have with somebody. And so just talking to somebody is not influencing them. This is a situation that calls for influencing someone to make an adjustment. And it's got to be someone to whom the person would listen to begin with. And who can understand where the person is coming from, and who can relate to that individual the benefits associated with making certain adjustments in style, the positive impact that would have in terms of the results and positive outcomes associated with actually doing that. So it all depends on who the influencer is going to be in those cases. I like to take on those kinds of cases myself in terms of talking to people. But again, it depends on who's going to do the talking.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Who in these matters, especially if you're dealing with a senior member who's been around for a long time, you have to understand that there is a certain resistance to receiving advice from certain people. So not everybody could influence another person in a particular situation. So you in that case, you have to say, okay, who is the best person to talk to this individual? And you have to get that best person to do the talking and the intervention, and the mentoring and whatever else is necessary for the person to make an adjustment.
Are there any last burning questions for PCC Malcolm? Anyone?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead, Lion Ngazika. Is that Lion Ngazika?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can.
very much.
Thank you. Good evening, PCC Malcolm. Thank you very much for this presentation this evening. Once again, good evening, District Governor Ingrid. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to speak with all of our fellow Lions of District 20K1. I was listening very keenly and clearly to PCC Malcolm when he referenced sanctions and due process. My question to you tonight, sir, is there, where can we find something that could, I guess what I'm trying to say now is the sanctions that you had mentioned. Is there somewhere on the portal where we can find these sanctions? And secondly, if the sanctions that you mentioned are not part of the bylaws, do they have to be placed in the bylaws before we start to utilize them in a club?
I'm not sure they need to be part of the bylaws. I think they need to be adopted. It could be adopted as a policy. And all policy items need not be in the bylaws. So So clubs can have governing documents. Clubs can have governing documents that speak to the Constitution, the bylaws, and policy documents. And these must all be approved by the membership. And so, so I think as a policy document that there should not be an issue. Now, with respect to where we can find matters relating to due process, I'm not sure, but in some constitutions, there are, in some constitutions, maybe dealing with somebody to be removed from office, for example, there's a sort of due process that is laid out. I have constitution, maybe not from a Lions Club, but I have something from a couple of other organizations where this whole matter of if you want to remove somebody from office, this is what you have to do. This is the due process in terms of A, B, C, and D. And but I think that Lions Clubs International should be able to help you with any resource information on that particular subject. The membership division should be able to provide you with some information on instituting due process procedures for removing people from office or whatever the situation might be.
And another question I have, would you think it would be wise also, once that has been settled, to introduce that into the orientation packet? So this way, when new members come in, they have an idea. It's not a surprise.
Well, yes, very important point. First of all, the orientation of a new member should not just be something that you do, you have a meeting and that's an orientation. When a new member comes into a club, the person's, yes, the orientation is important, but what's more important is the integration of that person into the club and the steps that need to be taken to ensure the full integration of that person. And that means that the person must become familiar with a whole range of things. The constitution of the club. Many orientation programs don't have anything about the constitution. They talk about the history of Lions Club International and the structure within the district and stuff. Right? But the integration of someone means that that person is introduced to all the governing documents. And the membership committee should assume the responsibility to see that that integration takes place, not just this one-time orientation about the history. I have an issue with that because just talking to me about the history of it doesn't help me to deal with the club I'm in. I need to know about the club I'm in, how it functions, what are the governing principles, that's important, what are the standards that I need to meet, you know. So, so integration should be an ongoing process beyond just talking about history and the history of the district and all these other kinds of things that are included in the orientation program. So you can't expect. So the question you're raising, yes, you have to find a way to fully integrate people, and you do that with information. Now, this whole matter, the question you're raising touches on something that I mentioned in my presentation. And I referred to it. There are several processes in a club that deal with the transfer of knowledge or transfer of information. And orientation is one of those things that has to do, how do we transfer, how we do information by introducing individuals to the workings of a club. This transfer of knowledge is a very important piece. Transfer of knowledge also deals with training. How do we transfer knowledge from one set of individuals who know what things are to those who do not? How do we transfer information relating to the functioning of a club from one set of individuals to the next? How do we transfer information from one administration to the next? So that whole process of knowledge transfer is very integral to a club being able to function effectively. Because when new people come in, they need to be brought up to speed. They need to know a whole lot of things that are not covered in, quote, orientation. Because some of it may involve skills and capabilities that need to be transferred in terms of what people need to, the competencies that they need to acquire to become effective in clubs and assume roles of responsibility, etc. So yes, very importantly, the integration process, not just the orientation process, should address the whole matter of transfer of knowledge. That's essential to people, equipping individuals with the knowledge needed to function effectively as a member of a club.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And as we wrap up this evening, in closing, I would like to thank PCC Malcolm for spending time with us, giving us that great introduction that led us into our discussion. And as we leave, there are many a time in our leadership journey that will require us as leaders, as he says, to listen and to learn. This will also present us with an opportunity to groom other leaders. And when such an opportunity arises, don't be selfish. Share your skills and knowledge. You do not dim your shine by lighting others. He asks us to reflect on our governing documents, to think strategically and to plan strategically. Where do we want, ask ourselves, where do we want to see our club go in another 3 years? What kind of club are we looking at? Then we need to look at what should we do to get there? What should we stop doing to get there? What would we continue to do to get there? How do we start doing what needs to be done? And how do we continue to build that better tomorrow? You cannot walk this journey of leadership alone. You'll need to have a mentor that will hold your hands and guide you. No organization alone can solve today's global challenges. It takes all of us working together to create that better tomorrow, and together we can. I thank you for joining us this evening. Have a good night.